on a bleak November afternoon, when the remote mountain passes of Eastern Europe were already cloaked in the heavy silence of early winter, with icy winds sweeping down from jagged ridges, and snow beginning to fall in scattered, stinging flakes. A lone traveler named Adrian Novak found himself trapped in one of the most harrowing experiences of his life. An ordeal that would later be remembered under the haunting headline, "Stray Dog Leads Rescuers to Accident Victim in Remote Mountain Pass." A story retold across newspapers, documentaries, survival lectures, and campfires as both a cautionary tale and a miraculous testament to the bond between humans and animals. Because on that day, in a place where no cell signal could penetrate and no help seemed possible, Adrian's only hope would come not from technology, not from planning, not even from his own strength, but from the unlikeliest of saviors. A stray dog with no name, no owner, and no reason to intervene except for the pure instinct to help. And the story that followed would weave itself into a legend of endurance, loyalty, and fate. Adrian had begun his hike in high spirits, eager to savor the quiet solitude of the high trails before the season closed them off entirely. His backpack stocked with food, water, thermal blankets, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a small survival knife. His boots sturdy, his coat zipped tight against the growing chill, his head filled with thoughts of freedom and escape from the world below. But even the most careful preparation cannot account for the unpredictable dangers of the mountains. And as he trekked along a narrow ridge that clung like a thread above a plunging valley, one misstep on a patch of treacherous frozen rock sent him tumbling, his body rolling violently down the slope, scraping over ice and jagged stones before coming to rest against a cluster of boulders. His leg broken in a sickening angle, his ribs bruised, his head pounding with dizziness, his breath a ragged wheeze, and in those first stunned moments, he instinctively reached for his phone, fumbling through his pocket, only to see the screen flicker lifeless, no signal, no lifeline, no voice waiting at the other end, just the oppressive weight of the mountains pressing down, the icy wind clawing at his skin, and the crushing realization that he was utterly alone in a place where even his shouts would carry no further than the cliffs that mocked him. Hours crawled by as Adrian shouted hoarsely into the emptiness, his cries bouncing back as faint echoes that only underscored the futility of his situation. His body trembling as hypothermia crept in with merciless fingers, his mind fraying with each passing minute, his thoughts splintering between despair and determination, until at last he fell silent, his breaths shallow, his spirit faltering, when suddenly, through the swirl of snow and the endless hush of the storm, he heard the crunch of paws on frozen ground. At first, he thought it was a hallucination, a cruel trick of a desperate brain yearning for company. But then a dark shape emerged through the haze. Lean, scruffy, its coat patchy, ribs visible beneath, its gait wary but purposeful, its eyes sharp with both intelligence and cautious kindness. A stray mountain dog that must have been wandering the pass in search of scraps or shelter. And for reasons Adrian would never understand, it approached him instead of slinking away into the wild. The dog sniffed his battered body, circled him once, then sat firmly at his side, as though laying claim, refusing to leave. And when Adrian groaned weakly, whispering words that were little more than a rasp, the dog tilted its head, as if listening, then raised its muzzle and let out a long, piercing howl that echoed across the valley. A cry so raw, so urgent, so demanding that it carried farther than any human voice could, cutting through the storm like a beacon of defiance. Again and again, the dog howled, pacing back and forth, returning to nudge Adrian with its nose, licking his face to keep him awake, pawing insistently at his chest whenever his eyes began to flutter closed, dragging him stubbornly back from the edge of unconsciousness. And in the endless blur of that night, as the cold deepened and death pressed close like a shadow, Adrian's last fragile tether to life was not the survival gear in his bag or the distant thought of rescue, but the stray's presence, the warmth of its body pressed against his shivering frame, the unyielding cadence of its howls, refusing to let the mountains swallow him in silence. By dawn, when Adrian was half-conscious, drifting between reality and oblivion, the miracle unfolded. A team of rescuers, dispatched after his family reported him overdue, had been combing the vast expanse of the pass, with little hope of finding him quickly in the blizzard. Their radios hissing with static, their own dogs struggling to pick up faint traces in the storm. When one rescuer halted suddenly, his head cocked, swearing he had heard something not belonging to the wind, the desperate, rhythmic howls of a dog. They followed it, scrambling down treacherous terrain, slipping on ice, clinging to ropes, until through the curtain of mist and snow, they saw the stray, its dark body darting back and forth, barking furiously, as though summoning them, leading them step by step to Adrian's broken figure, crumpled among the rocks. The rescuers surged forward, stabilizing his injuries with swift precision, wrapping him in thermal blankets, securing him to a stretcher, while the stray hovered anxiously, growling at first, its hackles raised as though unwilling to let strangers take its charge, then circling nervously, whining, before pacing beside them as they began the long, grueling climb back up the slope. Through every agonizing step of that ascent, the stray dog followed, never lagging, never leaving Adrian's side, even when the roar of helicopter blades split the sky, even when the rescuers loaded his fragile body aboard and lifted him towards safety. The stray stood below, its gaze fixed upward, its howl breaking one last time against the mountains, as though to declare, "He is yours now. I have done my part." Days later, as Adrian lay recovering in a hospital bed, warmed by heat and comfort, his body stitched and braced, his lungs filled with oxygen, his spirit finally out of danger, reporters crowded to capture his story. Survival experts dissected his mistakes. Psychologists marveled at the dog's instincts. But what lingered most in his heart was not the pain of broken bones or the terror of the night, but the memory of the stray's devotion, the sound of its endless howls, the feel of its body pressed close, the inexplicable choice it had made to save him when it could have turned away. In the weeks that followed, search parties returned to the mountains hoping to find the stray, to bring it down, to feed it, to honor it, to reward it for what it had done. But the dog vanished like a phantom, absorbed again into the wilderness, leaving behind only the legend of the nameless savior who refused to let a man die alone. To this day, Adrian speaks of it with tears in his eyes, saying that though he lost blood, time, strength, and nearly his life, he gained a truth that will never leave him. Salvation sometimes comes not from the things we plan, the tools we carry, or the people we expect, but from the unlikeliest of guardians, a stray with no master, no name, and yet more loyalty than any human could have imagined. A creature whose howl cut through a mountain storm and turned certain death into miraculous survival, proving that even in the harshest wilderness, hope can arrive on four paws, wrapped in fur, carrying no explanation but love. And if that is not proof of unseen forces guiding life, then perhaps it is proof of something even stronger, the untamed compassion that lives in the heart of every creature, waiting for the moment when it is most desperately needed.